It is an absolutely gorgeous day here in Central Ohio, so I wanted to invite everybody into the forge and share with you my latest project. We're going to be changing gears a little bit today. Today we are going to be doing some leather work. No, we're not making assless chaps. We're going to be making sheaths. So less talk and more work. Let's get going. Okay, so this is going to be our project for the day. Had a customer. This is his knife. I didn't make it, but he wanted he wasn't happy with this sheath. So he asked me to make him a new sheath for this knife, and that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to share with you step by step how I make a sheath. I'm self-taught. How I started making sheaths, one is I made them out of necessity. A knife maker, you know, you want to give the customer a product, but you also want them to be able to display it, carry it, protect it, or whatever. So what I started to do is I went to Tandy Leather, got a sheath kit, kind of dissected it, see how everything went together, and then started making them. I started educating myself more with YouTube and reading some books, and so this is how I make a sheath. So I'm going to share that with you today. So one thing the customer wanted is he wanted a kind of like a belt loop here instead of a belt loop attached on the back. He wanted a hook, and then we'll sew that in there, and then we've had a snap belt loop. So he requested we do that. So to start with, what we want to do is trace out the back side or the inside of the knife. So we're going to start with that portion first. And what I like to do is I will go around, and you can do reference marks. I've kind of got this down, but I measured 3/4 on each side of the knife, and that'll give me enough room to fit the knife in there and to also make a welt. And I'll show you what a welt is a little bit later. But these are just reference marks right now to kind of roughly tell me where 3/4 of an inch is. Okay. So then what I'll do is I'll just kind of roughly draw out the outline, following my reference marks, kind of like playing connect the dots. And I'm also kind of following the contour of the knife. Okay, until we got a pretty good outline of what we're going to be cutting out. Now, one of the hardest things for me, now, you know, this might be right brain, left brain. One of the hardest things when I first started was to remember, is this the inside of the sheath or the outside of the sheath? After a lot of practice, I've kind of got that down, but you can put down in here somewhere I'm sure that's upside down for you, in or out or something, so you can just, you know, remember where that is. The other thing we're going to do is, see, this has the guard has an interesting angle here. We also got to plan on not only the belt loop, but we're going to have a strap that comes across and attaches and snaps in for the knife. So we got to plan on that as well. What we can do is kind of look at this original sheath. So what I'm actually going to do is just keep on going with this where I'm going to make the cut. And so when I cut this, I'm just going to put a strip here so it could fold over just like this. Instead of having to make a separate piece or sew another piece in, we're just going to make it all one piece back here. And the same with our connector for our hook. We're just going to continue on with this a little bit so we can fold this over and sew it right to the back of the sheath. So, and since this is also the back, I really don't have to worry about this guard per se, except for as long as I'm taking the strap high enough and such. We'll worry about that when we do the front of the sheath. And we're probably going to take this in just a little bit. And you can always cut some of the excess off. You can remove leather, but you can't add to it without it making it look goofy. So we'll be generous with how we do this right now. And normally I like to make my straps also 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to just kind of get myself a mark here to roughly gauge right now how thick I want this. All right, I'm going to take a break real quick, get some more tools, and then we will get a really good draw out of what we're doing here, some crisp lines, and then we'll be ready to cut this sheath out. Okay, so what I did was I just took like a straight edge, got my measurements here to where what we want to cut out, what we don't, get a nice straight line. I'm going to leave this belt loop tab, or what we're going to be attaching the loop with, at about 1.25 inches width. It's not going to go this long, but like I said, better safe than sorry. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to cut this out with a razor knife. I'm not going to follow the exact pattern here. All I'm going to do is cut out a general area. And then I saw Chip Carlisle. He shared with some information on Facebook about how he makes sheaths. Chip is out of Alabama, and he has a podcast called the Knives Templars. And so I follow him on there and also on Facebook, and he shared a method with cutting this out that I really like. I used to use a razor knife, but a lot of times if you're cutting this way or this way, you're not straight, or if it gets dull or whatever, it just doesn't leave a very good cut. So what he suggested was using a bandsaw. And I started doing that, and I just love it. So I'm going to shut this down. We're going to move everything over to the bandsaw, and we're going to cut this out. All right, moving right along. We'll go ahead and use this bandsaw to cut this out. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. All right, we got this piece cut out. Let's get back to the bench. Okay, well now the time is the time to fit, to make sure our ring will fit here on this tab, and it doesn't. So what I got to do is go back and trim off about a couple 1/16 of an inch off this side right. I'm going to do it off this side right here so to make this fit better. So be right back. All right, so there we go. This fits now pretty good. As you can see, I like to go down to Tandy Leather just because it's not very far from me, about half an hour away. See, these things come in all sizes and colors. And again, it's best to test fit now instead of getting this all finished and find out, oh, I got to shave something off. So I think that's going to work pretty good. Our next step that I'm going to do is we're going to make the outside of the sheath. So back in a second. Okay, so now we're ready to make the outside of the sheath, and what I'm just going to do simply is use this back portion as a template. Trace this all out. And if you do this, it makes it a lot easier when you're going to be fitting everything together. They're about the same size. We'll still end up cleaning everything up, the edges and everything, but this gives you a pretty good idea of what you're dealing with here. So we got our knife here. And remember, we got this at it's an interesting angle. And these might interfere with what we're doing. I'm not sure yet, but we're going to go ahead and kind of get an idea of what we're dealing with here. And what we may end up doing is maybe kind of putting a notch in here or something so these can these hooks on the end of this guard can kind of fit in there better. I might just mark that out right now and cut those out. We'll get our straight edge, line up those marks so we can get that angle. And get our razor knife out. And it's back to the bandsaw. We'll cut this out, kind of see how that looks. And then we will, next step, we'll probably make the welt that goes in between these two, kind of like a sandwich. All right, let's get back to the bench and we'll make our welt. All right, in case you're wondering, I use 8 to 9 ounce leather for my sheaths. I like the thickness. And right now what we're going to do is we're going to use the outside sheath portion to make us a template for the welt. What's the welt? Well, what it is twofold. It's going to be sandwiched between the outside and the inside of the sheath. It does two things. One is it gives you some space, so you're not like jamming a piece of steel in between, you know, two flat pieces of leather and pushing everything out. It also protects your stitching from sticking your knife in there and slicing all your stitching out, and then you have nothing hanging on your belt. So for starters, I'm going to trace out the outline. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the actual knife to get me a trace of the profile so I know where to cut for the inside. And I'm going to leave it, you can see I'm not exactly on the blade. I still want a little bit of room here. But you want to leave enough space, and this might be a little bit excessive here. I still think it looks good. That gives me plenty of room to clean up the edges and also enough that my stitching can stay within this welt, that, you know, I don't make this welt so thin that I'm actually stitching on the inside of the sheath or something like that. So I like to make them maybe a little bit thick, but that's what works for me. And, you know, if you're new at this or you're a maker, it's all about what works for you. Okay, so the bad thing about making, I usually try to make these out of scrap material, but I didn't have a piece big enough for scrap because you're really not going to see it except for the edge. But what I'm going to do, you see me cut enough on the bandsaw. I'm going to go ahead, cut this section out, bring it back together. We're going to size everything up and keep on working. And we are back. So I've got the 3 pieces here for the sheath cut out, roughly shaped. We got the back, the welt, and the front. The last component we need to make is the belt loop itself, because this is going to tuck around and we've got to make the belt piece. So what we're going to do is I've got a squared off piece here already. I'm going to make this 1.25 inches wide and 12 inches long. And that should give us enough room to be able to fold it over, because we're going to be putting snaps that's kind of overlap. And we'll be able to have snaps and give you enough room to hold that sheath. So again, just like I did before, I'm going to do some reference marks. I'm actually going to go a little bit shy of 1.25 inches. And get yourself a straight edge, but always be careful, especially with these razor knives. Line up my marks. And we'll chase that down a little bit. And we might as well cut off this end right now so we can get a good measurement, about 12 inches. You gotta go a little bit further. And this really doesn't have to be exactly 12 inches. It's just to your preference. You just want enough room to be able to get your snaps in. So I might actually have to cut this off right here. So that's still going to be enough room to get 2 snaps in and accommodate a belt loop. Okay, so our next step is going to be, we're going to clean up a couple things on here. But what I really like to do, I don't clean up everything. What I like to do is get some dye on these pieces. And I do a lot of cleanup. That's like actually one of the last steps. So I'm going to take a time out real quick, get everything collected, clean up a couple things. Well, also what I'm going to do here, and I'll actually do this right now. I like to put a hole right here where these two meet, because this is going to be coming this way and this is going to be going this way, and it puts in a relief. I don't have the tool out here right this second, and I'm not going to make you wait for 2 minutes. So when I come back, we'll do that. We'll clean up some of these edges, measure this the size so we can get ready to actually fold over so we can get a good measurement there, and we'll just keep on trucking. Okay, I think I found everything I need for the next step. So what I want to do, I've got a small hole punch. Again, I want to just kind of put a relief right here, right where these two pieces of leather meet, to kind of relieve stress and perchance prevent anything from ripping. Well, that's not giving there. Get her something more solid. There we go. So now I've got that, and that just makes me feel a little bit better. This is going to be looping back around. We're going to sew this into the back to maintain our piece. So it's going to be going like this. So normally what I like to do is get at least 3 rows of stitches and give myself enough room to accommodate that. So I'm thinking it will be safe if we cut this off right about right here. Make sure you don't cut off your strap. Boom. Okay, and because we're going to be working with these pieces a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and kind of clean up these edges a little bit. And what we're going to do is, it's called burnishing. But before I do that, this is, I don't even know exactly what this tool is called. But what it does is it cleans up all these edges after I've cut it. You can kind of see that there's a little lip on that leather. So we want to take this and it kind of gouges off that leather. and prepares this so we can, it just makes a nice cleaner look. And now's about the best time to do this portion. We're not going to do the rest of the sheath until later. All right. So, if you can pronounce this, you're a better person than I am. I cannot pronounce it, but I know what it's used for. What this stuff does is it helps burnish these edges a lot better. And why are we burnishing these edges? If you look at a closer up of that leather, you see all that kind of fuzz and everything. Well, what burnishing does is it's going to clean all that up and it's going to seal it. It's going to actually look shiny when we're done. So all we're going to do right now, burnishing wise though, is we're going to do this top portion. And that's it. Because again, we're going to be folding this over, and it's a lot easier to do it now than after you've already folded this over, sewn everything in and everything. So I only do one area at a time. I'll put some of that on there. And this is a burnisher. And what you do is you run these grooves and you're creating friction. I use this to kind of get into the little nooks in here and maybe clean it up a little bit more. I'm going to get me a towel. Just wipe off the excess if you want. And I'm going to work on this tab here a little bit. Now, there's people out there that might have different methods, and that's fine. This is just how I do it, and I'm going to share it with you. Some people might think, oh my gosh, I would never do it that way, and that's fine. But part of this is what works for you and what does it look like in the end. So you can kind of see, once I get the dye in there, it'll be even better, but you can see it's nice and smooth now. So I'm going to clean up. We're about ready to start dyeing the leather. Oh, no, we're not. I almost forgot the belt loop. We want to go ahead and do that right now as well. So we'll go ahead and clean up these edges. And let's go ahead and burnish these now. As you can see, it doesn't take a long time to get this accomplished. And once I dye this, I might go back and touch those up anyway. So, brief timeout. I'll get everything cleared off so we can start dyeing. We're about ready to start dyeing the leather. I prefer to start on the inside first. And these are all the three pieces we're going to be working with: the inside sheath, the outside, and the belt loop. I'm using this Feeblings gel for this project, medium brown. I love the color, almost like an antique color. And I kind of like the gel. It's a little bit thicker. One thing I will say, well, two things. One is I want to stress to you, I'm not sponsored by Feeblings, by Tandy, or anything like that. I'm just kind of sharing with you how I source my stuff right now, especially if you're getting started. There's a lot of good products out there. Another thing is this stuff is messy, and if you don't want to walk around looking like you've been playing with rotten walnuts all day, you might want to put some rubber gloves on. So I've got some daubers here, but also sometimes to just get more quick coverage, especially on the inside, sometimes I'll just get a paper towel. But we're going to start. And normally what I do is if I'm using brown on the sheath, I'll do a brown interior. Same if it's black, black interior. Just to kind of match everything up. And this stuff's so thick that I think that a paper towel works pretty good and I think it's actually better, giving a better even looking coverage than the dauber. That's just my opinion. Now this stuff's going to be exposed, so we kind of want to make sure we get some nice coverage on this area. This stuff's like the consistency of ketchup. And quite honestly, though, this stuff dries out pretty quick. I don't wait super long for this interior to dry, and it might be because I'm always trying to stay busy. Now the outside coat I'll let dry usually overnight, so this is going to be a 2-day video. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead, step away from the camera a little bit. We'll let that dry out pretty good. Like I said, it doesn't take super long to at least make it workable. And then once it's fairly dry, we'll go ahead and we'll do the exterior side. Back in a few minutes. Hey everybody, it's been about 10 minutes, and as you can see, this is already at least dry enough now to work with. So what I'm going to do is flip everything over, and we're going to give the exterior a good coat, nicer coat, and we'll let that set overnight. You see we got a little bit of boogerage here. I'm not worried about that. That'll all come out. We want to focus on the edges here because we're going to be, again, folding this over tomorrow, sewing that up, and it's a lot easier to do now than after it's already sewed up. Nothing's impossible though. And so we'll do the same thing for the exterior. And we'll just throw some of this on here. And make a complete mess. Normally, my shop is not attached to the house. And I have an office out here too. It's an enclosed office, and I share that with a couple cats. Normally, I do my leatherwork in my office, especially when it's nasty weather or something like that. It's cold or hot. I'll go in there, but it's perfect weather today, so I decided to move everything out here. So that's why I'm kind of bouncing back and forth with, oh, I got to get this tool or that tool. But I really enjoy the fresh air going through here. And when I'm not making a video or something like that, what I'll do is I'll either have the TV on, I'll watch a movie or YouTube, some makers, and just enjoy that while I'm doing, especially leather work. I find it very relaxing. Now, if I'm in a groove, and I'm working some Damascus or making an axe or something like that, then I'll put on music so I can really get into a groove. And so my wife, it's like kind of not a rule, but she knows if she hears like the TV going, okay, she can come out visit, because I like to have her come out and visit. Share with her what we're doing out here. But if music's playing, she knows to kind of stay back a little bit because I'm kind of in a rhythm and getting stuff done. We got a nice little system going. And I dropped that. I really like this kind of antique finish and look of this leather dye. And there's a lot of different kinds of sheaths out there. There's a lot of different methods, and there's some really good leather makers out there. I mean, I kind of like to keep mine kind of simple and to the point. But I see some guys, man, they really, even their leather work is a work of art. And to each his own, you know. I like to make it kind of, again, more rustic looking. And, you know, I mentioned in previous videos, the two purposes really of a sheath is, one, to allow the person to carry it. But it's also there to protect the knife too. So those are two things to kind of keep in mind when you're making sheath. I'm actually glad I went on that tangent because I just had a customer reach out to me. He has a couple knives that he doesn't have sheaths for. And he asked me to make him some sheaths, so I got some more information, got the knives. And it turns out he's left-handed. And I'm glad we found that out because you would basically, most of my knives are made for right-handed people. So always keep that in mind if you're going to be doing some custom work for somebody. You know, find out if they're right or left-handed. And, you know, and ask them also, how are you going to be carrying this? And, you know, you can make like horizontal carry sheaths. You can, you know, like this one does have the belt loop. A lot of times I just, you know, sew the belt loop into the back. But there's a lot of flexibility with leatherworking. And you can, look, pretty much the sky's the limit. And I really enjoy that. And it's, to me, it wasn't hard to pick up. And you're adding a custom feature for the customer. You know, you're making a sheath for that knife. It's not a, you know, I went out and sized this up and yeah, it fits okay. No, that sheath is custom made to that knife. So it fits really well. And, you know, it's an added value to the customer, in my opinion. And I also enjoy telling them that I made that sheath along with the knife. Let me get a fresh towel. Now again, I'm not really going to focus on these edges right now because we're going to be doing a lot with that. We're going to actually do a little actual profiling on the belt grinder, clean all this up, match everything together once we glue that up tomorrow. So, you know, there's no point in dyeing that right now if I'm just going to be grinding it right off. I'm just looking for little spots that maybe need hit a little bit more. I'm trying to smooth this all out. But to be honest with you, I kind of like it a little bit blotchy because it gives it a rustic look. That's what I like. A friend of mine, what he likes to do is he likes to wet the leather down and take it up against a tree and smack it with a hammer to give a texture into the leather. I've done that once, and I think it's real, how he can do it a lot better than me, but it's a great idea because the leather will actually conform to that bark on the tree and just give it a really cool, rough look. Like you know, this was made 100 years ago. I think this needs to, the strap needs to be hit just a little bit more. Get these end pieces here. All right, so I'm going to call it a day on this. I'm just going to go off and do another project for the rest of the evening. Come back tomorrow and we're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to start gluing these pieces together, fitting everything up, sewing. I mean, tomorrow we will have a complete sheath. So with the help of TV magic, it'll probably be about 10 hours for me and it'll be about 2 seconds for you. Good morning, everybody. All our leather is nice and dry now. All our pieces that we're going to be working with today. Also last night, when this was pretty much dry anyway, I actually kind of worked this leather a little bit, kind of moving it back and forth to give it some of these wrinkles, to kind of give it more texture and character. You can do that if you like. I kind of like the way it looks. Again, I don't want this almost looking like a, I don't know, brand new sheath per se. I kind of like to give it a rustic look with my product. So I did that on the inside and the outside. You can see the little bit of texture I've got there, just adds to it. So before we start putting everything together, because of the design of this sheath, we have to do a couple things today. One thing we have to do is we have to put a snap in the middle here, like the old one. We're going to install that right here before we put everything together. You can do it afterwards, but it's a lot easier when it's still apart. Another thing we're going to do is we are going to start gluing pieces. Now, glue I use just to hold everything in place until I can get everything punched and I can use thread to sew everything together. I know some people like to use barge cement. I'm not a big fan of it. I feel like it just takes too long to set up. I tend to use this product here, and again, I'm not endorsing any product. I'm just sharing with you what I prefer to use. This stuff sets up really quick, and it really gets me a good bond, and it even holds up when I'm punching holes in the leather. So this is what I prefer to use, so we're going to be using that today as well. And keep in mind how I do things is the cement really isn't there to hold everything in place once everything's done. It's just there to hold things in place until I can get holes punched and get everything sewn together. The sewing's going to hold these things in place, so keep that in mind as well. So what I'm going to do, I got my tab cut. I'm pretty happy. It's a little bit harder to see because of the lighting and it's darker. But I'm just going to put a little bit of adhesive right here, fold this over, and I'm going to clamp it and let it sit for about 15 minutes, and then I can move on to other things. So let's go ahead and do that right now. And don't forget to put your ring in there, because once you sew this over, you got to take it all apart if you don't have the ring in there. And also make sure it's where you want it. I'm just going to use this a little bit sparingly. Again, all I'm using it to do is to hold this in place until I can sew it. And I'm just going to clamp it on there. And let it sit. If you get a little bit excess, just wipe it off with a towel. A little bit of water ain't going to hurt nothing. And I'm going to put that over to the side. And now we're going to plan on where we're going to want to put our snaps. So snaps come in 4 different pieces if you've never used them before. And I get mine at Tandy Leather. I guess you probably figured that out by now, but you can get them in other places as well. So if we kind of go off of where this sheath original one is, I might put it down just a little bit further. But if we look at how that's going to go, it's going to put it right in the middle. So it'll wrap around the guard and retain that in better. So the strap's kind of got to go like this. So I'm thinking if we put it right around in here, I'll be good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to the anvil. I like using the anvil because it's a nice solid base for hammering, punching holes, So we're going to move over there and we're going to start on putting in this snap. Okay, I'm over here at the anvil. I'm ready to punch the hole so I can install the snap on the outside of the sheath. And we got our hole right there. And I mentioned earlier, these come in, the snaps are in 4 pieces. So I'm going to take this piece, run it through the back. So this is the inside of the sheath. And then we have part of the snap. I'm going to insert it on this side. And then if you ever get one of these, you need to get a snap kit. And this is what they call like a mini anvil. And you put this on the back side of your snap. And then you have like a drift or a punch. And what that does is it folds the inside over and retains these 2 pieces together. So line all that up. And I kind of turn the drift around a little bit. Make sure you don't have to use a lot of force. As you can see, that's nice and in there now. So we got that out of the way, but we do have this piece of metal in here. And I usually don't like leaving it the way it is, just because it could scratch the finish of a knife or a handle. Depends on where the snap is. So we're going to do something about that. I'm going to take you back over to the bench and we're going to address this issue also before we put everything together. Okay, so how do we keep this snap from scratching the heck out of our nice shiny knife? Some people, and sometimes you can line this whole thing with like a thin leather, like a pig skin. I've got some pig skin here, real thin. You can do the whole thing, or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a little bit of 5-minute epoxy. This is West Systems 5-minute epoxy. And I'm just going to glue a piece of pig skin to cover that up. And once you get everything together, you're not even going to see it. So we're not going to need a lot of this. The nice thing is it sets up, actually I call it like 7.5-minute epoxy because it seems like it takes that long. Might be because of the humidity. But at least it doesn't take 24 hours. So here's my little piece of pig skin. It's just enough to cover the snap. And then if you want, you can just clamp that in place. All right, we're gonna let that dry. And by now the adhesive on our back side of the sheath should be dry enough to where we can start punching our holes to sew this in place, and we'll start on that project. Okay, I have 3 punches that I can use to punch my holes for sewing. And normally I use the 4. And you can get these spaced in different intervals to change how the pitch of the sewing is. I just use this one. I don't even know exactly the number on it. 3mm. So what I'm going to do, put those away for right now. I'm going to start right here, and this is pretty much wide enough. Get that in camera better. That I could just do one row of punches across here. And I'm going to do 3 sets. 1, 2, 3. And that will be enough to secure this really good and hold this loop in. We'll make sure your punch is straight up and down, not at an angle like this. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I think you get the gist of it. Straight up and down. Now the only downside on this, it's not really a downside, but these are barely long enough to go, when you're using thicker leather, it's barely long enough to get through. As you can see right there, it's barely going through. So what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to chase these holes with a drill bit on the drill press tool. Make them just a little bit bigger and to make sure they go through both layers of leather. And this is a lot more imperative when we put the weld in, we're sewing everything together. You got 3 layers. And this is just not long enough to get through all 3 layers. But these are good for a reference. And if these stick on you, because sometimes they get kind of, you can dip these in like beeswax and they'll pull out a lot easier. Okay, so we're done here for right now. We're going to be doing a lot of this today. I'm going to go over to the drill press and we're going to drill these out and we're going to sew this in. Okay, so what I've got here now is I've got a 3/32 drill bit. And I also like to put a block of wood underneath my leather when I'm drilling these holes out. You might have to experiment with what drill bit works for you, but I'm using a 3/32. So all I'm going to do is very slowly drill out. Basically, I'm reaming out these holes, making sure they go all the way through so it's a lot easier to sew together. So we're going to go ahead and do that. All right, so we got our holes drilled out. We're ready to go ahead and sew this together here. Back in a bit. All right, so we got our holes punched and drilled for the belt loop retainer. My 5-minute or 7.5 minute epoxy is all set up now to protect that snap. And so I want to glue in the welt now to the outside, so that can be setting up a little bit while we sew our belt loop in. So moving right along. I'm just going to use some of my leather weld. And put a bead along the welt. And I've said it once, I'll say it again. This stuff is not going to be holding the sheath together. I utilize it to just hold this stuff in place until I can get it sewn together. Now, you don't have to also be super exact. You can have a little bit of overlap. That's okay because we're going to clean all that up later once we get everything sewn up. So I want to clamp this with my Harbor Freight special clamps. But hey, they work, right? You never have enough clamps. I always walk by their $5 bin, whether I'm in Tractor Supply or Harbor Freight or wherever I may be. Grab a couple clamps. We use these little guys too. All right, so I got that clamped up. I'm gonna put this over to the side and we'll focus on sewing here. All right. So I've already got a needle and thread from another project. I've got enough thread here to sew this in. Okay, so you always want to make sure you got enough thread. So all I do, this is how I do it. I'll loop this around twice around my finger. And I'll tie a knot. And then I'll cut the excess off. All right, so I usually don't start right at the edge. I usually will come in the middle somewhere, and I'll actually peel this back. If you can see this, I'll peel it back a little bit. To start my needle. I got fat fingers. All right, so to hide that knot, and then this is how I stitch. I know some guys do a saddle stitch, like you've got two needles and you're going back and forth. Because I'm self-taught, I didn't teach myself that method. That's probably quicker than how I do things, but I'm not really in a hurry anyway. One of my friends, John Summerhill, he has a sewing machine, and that makes things so incredibly easy, but I do not have the funds right now to buy a sewing machine. And quite honestly, to be honest with you, I find like sewing and leatherwork in general very relaxing and therapeutic. That's just me. Some people might think it's a pain in the butt. To each his own. But I'm just going to start sewing this in. And because I drilled out these holes, this is a lot easier. And quite honestly, when you you clean it up in your last steps, it looks great. Okay, so I've made one pass all the way up. Now I'm going to start going back. Oops. Caught myself there, so I need to pull this back out a little bit. Some slack. There we go. Pull it through. Okay, so some idiot last night forgot to plug in his camera. The good thing is we really were about ready to wrap up that last session. I just finished up sewing the tab up on this and we're ready to move on. This is nice and dry. Our welt to the front of our sheath. So really all I'm going to do is now I'm going to glue the front portion onto the back portion here. Let it dry for a little bit and then we're ready to start punching some holes, get this thing sewn up and get her out the door. So like we did earlier, let's put a bead of adhesive here on the welt portion. Try to line it up as good as possible. Again, I said, you know, you don't have to be perfect because we're going to be cleaning these edges up and everything. All right, so we'll just let that sit for a little bit, and when it's dry, I will be back. Okay, so I've let that glue sit for about 15-20 minutes, so I think we're safe to remove these clamps. And what I want to do is do a very careful test fit. The glue should hold pretty good, but I don't want to force anything and rip everything apart. And that looks like that's going to fit really nice. Definitely conforms up here pretty good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this over to the grinder, my 2x72 grinder, and I want to clean these edges up really good before we do any stitching. So let's move over to the grinder and get going. Okay, so on the grinder I've got a 60 grit belt, and I'm going to turn the speed down quite a bit. My goal isn't to burn up the leather. I just want to remove this welt section and get everything nice and even. And you'll see why we do that. There's actually a couple different reasons why. One is I'm going to put a tool that traces a line on the edge of where I'm going to be doing my stitching, and that way I can get nice even stitching, and also it'll recess that stitching down in there a little bit. The other thing about it is too is when I want this all nice and shiny, so when I buff that up it all looks like it's almost one piece. So let's go ahead, I'm going to turn this down a little slow speed, and we'll clean this up. You don't want to be in a hurry on this, because again, you don't want to burn the heck out of your leather. We got a little bit more to do, but not very much. And we're almost there. Just a little bit more. As you can see now, it's pretty nice and straight, got a nice curve here, everything's fairly uniform. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the camera down, finish this side, and then we'll move on to the next portion of the project. Okay, so you can see now that I've got all my edges pretty good and cleaned up. Everything's nice and even. And so what I want to do, it's going to peel up this leather a little bit. So we're going to take our edging tool and we're going to run down this real quick, clean it up on both sides. And as you can kind of see now, kind of takes off that excessive lip. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what this thing's called, but what it does is, again, it puts a groove to give me a reference to where I want to punch my holes for my stitching. And also it allows that stitching to kind of sit down in there more so it's not popped up. This is adjustable. And I've got it pretty much set where I want it, but if you ever have any questions, you can kind of see my weld in there, right here. So I want this line to be pretty much centered inside the welt. So that's what you want to do. So what I'll do is I'll start, and I don't go all the way to the front. I kind of guesstimate right here, you know, where this line will intersect. And lightly, right now I'm just lightly scoring this leather. And now you can kind of see I've got this line. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back with a little bit more pressure so I can make that a little bit deeper. But you want to kind of do this slow and steady because you don't want to goof up and oops, because you might end up having to remake this piece of leather here because it just don't look good. And then start on this side, light pressure. And just let this kind of foot follow the profile of the sheath. Okay, so I want to clean this up. We're ready to start punching the holes for the stitching, but I want to clean this up just a little bit more. But we're about ready to go. So I'm going to shut the camera. We're going to move back over to the anvil while I've got my punches. We'll punch all this out. We'll drill all this out, and we're ready for stitching. Be right back. And we're back. I'm going to start doing the punching on this. I'm going to use my 4-prong punch again, and what I like to do is I like to start at the tip here and work my way around. Now if it's too sharp, and this might be, I'll take out my 2-prong. That way I can get a better radius here. It's not straight, chunky. I want it to be nice and smooth transition on these curves. So we'll play that one by ear, see how it goes. Another thing you want to keep in mind, like if you got anything on the back of this sheath, you want to try to keep this sheath as level with your, you know, your hit plate as you can. You don't want it to be like wonky like this and be punching through like this, because I didn't put those guidelines on the back, but you want these to be straight. You don't want to look over here and you got holes over here, all that. You want them to be as uniform as you possibly can. So, we'll start out. And keep in mind too, like I mentioned earlier in the video, this isn't going to go all the way through. Okay? That's what the drill press has got to be for. But this gives me a good starting point, so I can go there, go over to the drill press, clean all these up, and have some nice stitching lines. What I also do is I don't move over like this, if you can see that. I put my first prong into my hole, and that way they're nice and uniform the whole way. I'm not over here, now I've got a gap that, you know, all these gaps all over the place. So I'm going to put that in that hole, that last hole. So technically I'm only punching 3 holes right now. And I'm not going to film this whole thing. That's ridiculous. I think you get the gist of what we're doing here. And but what I'll do is I'm going to shut the camera off, finish this off, and then we'll go over to the drill press. And we are back. And I'm fairly certain I lost track of what year this is. I've got all my holes punched now. You can see they don't go through. So again, I want to stress this, you know, sometimes you might have a sheath with a belt loop back here and it will kind of push this up. I'll either try to put this on the side. Just want to keep this flat so you're not drilling into the leather at an angle. Just like punching the holes, I'm not going to film drilling 200 holes in leather. I'll drill a couple, we'll check on the other side, take a look, and then I'll put the camera down. And after this step, we are ready for stitching. So let's get going. I've actually done a couple holes already. And just take your time on this. Okay, so here's our holes on the other side. They all look pretty good and uniform. Like I said before, I'm going to go ahead and put the camera down, bust this out, and then we'll be ready to sew this sheath up. As you can see, I've got all the holes drilled. They're all going through on the other side. Very nice and even. So I think we're good to go. I think I hyperventilated by blowing all that sawdust off, but still kicking. All right, let's stitch this up. And this will take a lot of twine. This is wax coated. It's pretty tough. And just like I said with the leather, it's better to have too much than not enough. Too bad I don't have a 20-foot wingspan. And I have yet to devise a method on how to actually gauge how much twine I need. So I just get a whole bunch that I know is going to be enough. And start sewing. We'll get this needle threaded. Put my knot in the end, just like we did on the belt hook there. And again, I will peel this open a little bit, and I don't start at the beginning. I start a couple holes in. That way it just looks cleaner to me. That's my own personal preference. So I can open this up now. I've got all my holes drilled. And you want to be careful this string doesn't get knotted up on you when it's long like this. Just another one of those things where just take your time. Make sure your knot's down in here. It's not hanging out, that it's tucked in here. And once you get this all together, you won't even know. You won't even see that knot. So I'm going to do a couple stitches. I'm not going to bore you with 30 minutes of me sewing this up. You only have to do it a couple times for you to get the gist of what we're doing. But what I'll do is, when I'm close to the end, I'll start the camera back up so you can kind of see how we finish this. And again, also, you know, there's some guys that they'll do like I guess it's like a saddle stitch they call it. You can put this in almost like a vise. You can go back and forth with 2 needles. I just have taught myself this method. It probably is a lot slower, but it works for me. And this is actually slower too because I'm trying to do this on camera. But quite honestly, it won't really take me that long to stitch this up. All right, so I'm gonna put the camera down, start stitching around on this, and get me a nice comfortable chair and a glass of water, and I'll be back when I'm about ready to finish all the stitching. Okay, we're back. Just under 2,000 feet of string used. We are about ready to wrap things up here, everybody. On the end here, I like to do it twice, just to give it a little bit added strength there. Not sure you need it or not, but I like to do it. And a lot of times I'll use these little pliers. Just gotta be careful because these needles can be kind of delicate. You don't want to break them off. And I'm about ready to finish this up, so I'm going to leave this loose so I can tie my last knot. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this in a little bit. What I want to do is loop this around about twice. And just pull that real tight. Just cut it off flush. Some people will get a lighter and burn that, but I guess the way I do it, it just stays in there, and I've never had an issue. This thread is it has wax, and what it sometimes does will leave some residue. So I like to kind of just wipe it down real quick. And try to get any kind of balls of wax. Because it'll look cleaner, and also I'm going to go over this one more time with some dye. And that'll probably be, it's one of the last steps. Now I want to get my hammer. Because I want to tap down all these threads. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. And because I put that ridge in there, it doesn't look bad. But I've seen some other guys do this and it doesn't hurt. I kind of like the look. You just lightly tap on your threads. Just to kind of seed them. If that makes sense. Okay. Some of these last couple steps you can do them in almost any order, just as long as you do them. What I want to do though is I want to get that gum and burnish these edges. Get them all nice. I've got a little bit of a flap of leather here I want to get rid of. Okay. So I don't need this anymore. And we got our burnishing tool again. Sometimes this isn't even this groove right here is not even wide enough. So a lot of times when I burnish, because this is pretty thick, so I use this. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to clean all that up, get all nice and contoured and shiny. You have to use a little bit of force. And you want to not just do the flat, but do the edges a little bit too. Round them off, get them all nice and clean. And then we'll start on the other side. This gum really makes a difference. It makes it a lot easier to do. Just makes your edge a lot more clean. It doesn't take as long to really get a nice edge on this. And now I'll just get a towel and wipe off the excess. Okay, we're almost finished. About the only thing we have left to do is we got to find out where we want our snap to be on here. And also remember, we do have our belt loop, which will, it's not technically going to even be attached. We're going to put 2 snaps in here. And it's going to be something like that. So what we can do right now is we can measure where we want to put these snaps, because we're going to go back over. We got to punch a hole in the strap on here, and we're going to have to punch 4 holes on here. So let me get my pen so we can mark where we want this at. And you want to have this semi-centered. And you put these roughly about 1 inch away from each other. Be nice to have a good pen. Okay, so we know now we punch these out. We can put our snap bases in here, and then I'm going to show you how you line everything up. But first, we're going to fit our knife in here. Man, that's smooth. Nice fit. Comes out fairly easily though, but it does have some good retention already. So this is going to wrap around like this, and this is how we're going to size this up. Put a little bit of tension on here, and then I'm going to push down onto my snap, and you can see there's a little indentation there. Well, that tells me that where I want to punch my hole for this. So let's go ahead, grab our gear, we'll go over to the anvil, we'll punch these holes out on these 2 straps, we'll get that going, and we'll almost be done. All right, so I got my trusty hole punch, got to center it in that indentation from where the snap was. Boom. And I got my little anvil. Now we're going to utilize this side. See, there's little cups or indentations in there. What that allows us to do is put that base of that snap in there. It fits right in there, and so when we hammer this down, it doesn't smash it, doesn't mar it up, doesn't smash it, and you get a nice finished product. Also, make sure you're doing this slow. Make sure you're doing this the right way. I have done this opposite. And then you're saying a couple cuss words, getting a drill bit out, and blah, blah. So save yourself some trouble. And so again, I poke this right through that hole. I've got my other piece right here. We're going to lay that right in that cup. You can feel it slide in there. And I got my little drift. Again, you don't have to beat the sin out of this thing. All you're doing is rounding off that tip in there and it retains everything. Okay, so let's do a test snap. Make sure it snaps okay. Boom. Nice and crisp. I'll go back and I'll trim this off so that looks nicer. Okay, let's go ahead and do our belt loop. So I got my 2 reference holes where I want to punch my holes here on this side. And I'm doing the bottom portion. So insert in there. Using the flat portion of my anvil. I don't need my punch, I need my drift. Excuse me. Check to make sure it's snug. Second one. Just like I did on my other snap, now what I want to do is I want to fold this over and give yourself a little bit of room here. You don't want this on the edge. Okay, give yourself some room. Make sure everything's lined up and push down again so we get a good indentation of where we want to punch these holes. Okay, so we got a nice indentation here and here. We'll go ahead and punch those out. This saves you from having to measure everything again and getting it dead on, because this will get it dead on. Okay, I only got one snap, so I'll be right back. I never claimed that I could count well. And again, make sure we know which way to put these. So, just like that. Put it in the cup. Now, if you mess one of these up, you can get a drill bit, drill out that center point, and you can save your leather. So you're allowed to say a couple cuss words, but all is not lost if you perchance mess one of these up. All right, so let's do a test snap. Voila. So we're done with that. We've already burnished the sides and the edges. We may touch this up with a little bit more dye to match the sheath, because I am going to put a little light layer of dye on the sheath again. But snap-wise, we're good to go. Let's go back over to the work table. My gosh, I think we probably hiked about 10 miles today. Okay, we only got about 2 more steps to go and we are done. Side note, one thing I am really guilty of is leaving tools all over the place and working around them. I highly suggest, and I've had to train myself, to take a second to remove the tools that I don't need, so I'm not fumbling all over them, I'm not knocking them over, they're not getting in the way. Try to have a clean workspace. So now I never put any dye on this edge. Okay, so I want to put some dye there. I want to put dye on the whole thing, to be honest with you, just to cover up. Oh, we also need to cut that real quick. And this is a time also where you want to look around, make sure, see if there's any places you do need to hit, like right here, here. And I like to put a little bit of dye, because sometimes when you drill out the holes, it kind of boogers it up just a little bit, so you can see like fresh leather. So we're going to do that right now. And remember, this doesn't take that very much time to dry. Just a little bit. You don't want to go overboard. So just kind of wipe that in real nice. A little bit at a time. Light coat on the front here. Also want to hit these edges here. These are just little things, but they're important. One thing I want to invest in next, and I haven't yet, I want to get a leather burner for my logo. so I can put them on the back of my sheaths. I haven't gotten to that point yet. A little bit on the back here. Get the strap. Get this end. That's a little bit more. And this stuff soaks in really quick. Yeah, look, Mom, I've been playing with rotten walnuts again. So memory as a kid, me and my brother, we grew up in the country and had a woods behind our house. We thought it would be fun to throw walnuts at each other. Mom wasn't too happy about that, but I think she eventually got over it. Make sure we're getting the inside in here as much as you can. It's those little things that make a difference, in my opinion. You know, give them a quality piece, especially if you made the knife. You know, make the sheath. Put as much effort into the sheath as you did your knife. Okay, let's check the strap. And I think that color matches pretty good, so I don't think we have to put anything on that. That being said, the last thing we're going to do, last step, what I protect my leather with is neat's foot oil. So I'm going to shut the camera down. I'm just going to apply this neat's foot oil, let it soak in for a minute, and then we can conclude this instructional video. So let me do that, and I will be right back. All right, that about wraps everything up. Beautiful rustic looking sheath, handcrafted leather. Very good, nice, solid retention, like I showed you. But it does come out very nice and inserts very nice. And I'm sure the customer will want his other sheath back. So I think we are done. So give me a second to wrap this up, and we'll go into a conclusion, and we're out of here. So that about wraps up this video. Finished product right here. I thank everybody for sharing their time with me today. I feel that it's a privilege to be able to help share my knowledge with you to help you. If you have any questions for me, reach out, leave a comment in the video, or you can reach out to me on my website, swfknives.com. Until next time, like, share, subscribe, and stay sharp, everybody. I've got grass to mow.